I'm back, continuing my countdown of Rolling Stone's top 200 greatest hip-hop albums of all time list. Welcome to episode 8 out of 10. I'll be tackling number 60 to 41 on Rolling Stone's list. I've been doing 20 albums per episode, breaking this list down. We've come a long way, but we're getting close to the end. We're going to cross into the top 50 in this episode. We are squarely into critical territory. So pretty much every album that you're going to see on this list is considered a classic by Rolling Stone. There have been a lot of ridiculous picks so far. I expect more as we get deeper, but at the same time, I think there'll be some good ones too. We're going to see some banger albums. So let's get right into it. Kicking it off, number 60, Kendrick Lamar's 2017 album, Damn. Following generation-defining classics in 2012's Good Kid, Mad City and the excellent, flawless To Pimp a Butterfly in 2015, Kendrick came back with a more mainstream-facing record. Kendrick was no stranger to mainstream success, and as fantastic as those albums are, they did have some radio cuts, but on Damn, he doubles down on that, and more songs are radio friendly than not. But you know what? I think he pulled it off pretty well. I will say that when it came out, I was a bit disappointed. I was expecting the next installment of these bona fide classics. But as the years have gone by, I've really learned to appreciate this album. I think a lot of people have, and I think this album is aging rather well. It really does show Kendrick's sonic diversity, especially on the lead singles Loyalty, you have DNA, you have Humble, and there's a number of other songs that were singles and were popular and received airplay. Having said all this, I do think this is Kendrick Lamar's weakest album, and it belongs probably outside my top 100, so I think 60 is a bit ambitious. But I'll also say this, Kendrick Lamar is so talented and his catalog is so deep that even his weakest album is still kind of knocking on the doorstep of a classic and really is a great album. It's a testament to Kendrick as an artist and everything he's capable of. 59, Life After Death by the Notorious B.I.G. This is one that's constantly included in the top 10 or top 20 on lists from other publications I've covered in the past. I've always criticized that placement. This is not a top 10, 20, 25, 30, or even top 50 album for me. Putting it around the top 50 is much more appropriate. This is a pick that shows that Rolling Stone is actually capable of having a reasonable opinion. Biggie essentially forecasted his own death on this album, and the way he spins this story over the double disc, which has, by the way, like a 140-minute runtime, it is actually pretty stunning, and it's quite a tale. It's a saga. But this is the album that really got that whole dreaded shiny suit thing going. You know how critical I am of how New York hip-hop got watered down in the second half of the 90s, and that sick Puffy's voice is all over this thing. He's the guy who was responsible for that, and it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth overall. But at the same time, it is a really good album. There's some great cuts off of here. I do think that ultimately it is a top 100 hip-hop album despite all this, despite Puffy, despite the long run time. But it's not a top 50 album. It's not a top 25 album because, you know what, it just hasn't aged well. And you can thank Puffy for that. But Biggie, he just goes off lyrically here. This is a cinematic record with some excellent lyrics and concepts, but really anything from that shiny suit era, it just turns me off. America's Most Wanted by Ice Cube at number 58. This is my favorite hip-hop album from 1990. I think this is probably a few spots too low. This should at least be somewhere in the 40s, definitely inside the top 50. This is one of hip-hop's most furious debut albums of all time. So Cube, who was freshly pissed off after a falling out with N.W.A. at the end of the 80s, where he led the lyrical charge, where he was kind of the heart and soul of that group, he comes out with this booming, confident, angry performance which remains one of the most passionate I've ever heard. The Bomb Squad from the East Coast, famous with their work with Public Enemy, does the beats here, which was a really interesting East meets West thing before the two coasts had a conflict. And it gives the album this ultra gritty sonic aesthetic, and it's full of deeply political songs that the beats fit perfectly over, like the title track, like Endangered Species with Chuck D from Public Enemy, all the way back to slightly more humorous and creative cuts like A Gangsta's Fairy Tale. Ice Cube shows great energy throughout this thing, but also versatility as an MC who's very forthcoming and brutally honest. Again, I'd put this one a bit higher. Licensed to Ill by the Beastie Boys, kind of like Notorious B.I.G.'s Life After Death, this is an album that's constantly overrated and glazed on these lists. 57 is a bit too high. While this was a landmark album that had some of the most forward-thinking production of the mid-80s, and you can thank Rick Rubin for that, the frat boy lyrics are fun, but they're overall pretty gimmicky. I revisited this album recently, tried not to be so cynical, and I just couldn't get past it. It doesn't doesn't really do it for me. I love the Beastie Boys' next 4 albums with all my heart, but I have trouble with this one, as catchy and as iconic and as trailblazing as it was. The booming beats do give it some much needed replay value, especially on songs like Paul Revere, but I can't see myself including this even in my top 100. Let's hope that we at least see the fantastic Paul's Boutique later on this list. 56 is one I'm not as familiar with as I'd like to admit, but from the couple times I've heard it, I've enjoyed it. It's from Chicago rapper Noname. It's her album Room 25. She was known for her breakouts on early Chance the Rapper mixtapes. She's an accomplished poet who shows some impressive writing skills on this record and a couple of the other projects of hers that I've heard. The record is jazzy, it's socially conscious, and there are strong elements of poetry in her rapping. Apparently she's a poet and has done a lot of slam and beat poetry. It's a quick 35-minute project, but there is a lot going on here, and this project has always kind of spun my head a little bit, but it's enjoyable. It's great to see a deeper dive into poetry on a modern hip-hop album. I think that's a really cool spin. At the same time, including it all the way up at number 56, doesn't that seem a little ambitious to you? There's a ton of other classics that'll likely get snubbed that should be in this spot instead of Noname's Room 25, which is a good album, so I feel kind of bad saying that. I'm torn. All that said, I like this album. It's creative, it's different, it's unique, and Noname is really talented. Midnight Marauders by A Tribe Called Quest at number 55. I guess this is respectable placement, though in my personal opinion, I'd cut this thing's rank in half and put it probably even in my top 25. I'm gonna be counting down my personal top 100 favorite hip-hop albums once I finish with this list, so we'll have to see where Midnight Marauders lands. But I do know this, number 55 is too low. Now, I do think their previous album, The Low End Theory, it's just a little bit stronger, but it's almost equal. We have almost like a 1A and 1B going on here for the best Tribe album. I'm sure we'll see The Low End Theory a little bit later on this list, but the group gets a little more gritty here while keeping that whimsical, jazzy, conscious charm that was so present on their first couple records. Things in 93 were looking a lot more rugged on the East Coast than in 91 when they dropped The Low End Theory. We see this with more aggressive beats on songs like Clap Your Hands and Oh My God, for instance. But it's Q-Tip and Phife Dawg's back and forth energy that really goes to the next level here on cuts like the amazing, perfect 5 out of 5 song Electric Relaxation, Steve Biko, and of course Award Tour. All these songs steal the show here for me. This is one of hip-hop's most storied groups at or near their peak, and to not put it in the top 50, that's a miss. Now see, this is what I mean. Culture by Migos at 54. In the last episode, I got very annoyed with the number of classics up in the 60s and 70s. We had a string of them from the 80s and 90s that should have been much higher. These are albums that I would consider spots in the top 50 or right on the doorstep, and they're getting pushed down for albums like Culture, which is totally inappropriate because this is not even close to an album that belongs probably even in the top 150. Migos, let's be honest, they were a pretty big deal in the second half of the 2010s. They were very influential in evolving the southern rap and trap scenes, but the album's just not that good. I mean, I don't care how influential they were. The music just isn't great. That's an opinion, but I think a lot of people would probably agree with me. It does have iconic moments. You have fun songs like Bad and Bougie and T-Shirt. They're staples on this record, but that doesn't justify nearly a top 50 placement. This is a big miss by Rolling Stone, especially when we're putting it ahead of Midnight Marauders. Alright, now a weird pick at number 53. It's not as bad as the last one. It's one I actually respect. It's Salt-n-Pepa's 1986 debut, Hot, Cool, Vicious. I respect the hell out of Salt-n-Pepa. They were one of the first female collectives to do their thing in hip-hop. They towed the line between commercial and hardcore pretty well. I don't even think, though, that this is their best album. I think that's 1993's Very Necessary. We definitely won't see that higher up on the list. I think Hot, Cool, Vicious gets the nod here just because it was their debut. It was trailblazing because it was a trio of female artists, 2 MCs, and a DJ. That said, this really isn't the greatest album quality-wise. It's got some fun grooves. It sounded pretty good for 1986, let's be honest. There's some great songs on here like I Desire and Beauty and the Beat, but top 50? Who puts this in their top 50? I've never seen that before. It's a confusing pick, even if I appreciate this record's importance. Alright, 52, Kanye West's The College Dropout. This is his best album, if you ask me. It was really after this record that he started on a long road of being an insufferable shithead. Subsequently, from that point, I lost pretty much all interest in his music. If there's one Kanye album I listen to, it's this one. I think Spaceships is actually a fantastic song, which I revisit probably a little bit more than I'd like to admit. I could see how this thing would achieve nearly top 50 status. The pick makes sense, though I really wouldn't put this or any of Kanye's work even in my top 100, as I just don't like him. But look, it's a very personal album. It kicks off his solo career by immediately showing all of these layers that make up this sadly complicated person, this twisted human, and at the same time, musically, it's actually really, really good. I get this placement. I don't really agree with it. Top 150, that would make more sense for me personally. Things Fall Apart by The Roots at number 51. I think this is a fairly decent pick. I think this slides up into maybe my top 40. This is actually not my favorite Roots album. It's number 2 behind Illadelph Half-Life, their previous album. I don't think that album will make this list since it hasn't already, so that's a miss. But this was my hometown group's kind of a national and international breakout record. They had been grinding locally and in jazz rap circles for years. They were pretty big on the East Coast before this album, but not too much outside of this part of the country. The single You Got Me with Erykah Badu really ascended the Roots right at the end of the 90s. That is a fantastic, amazing, nearly perfect song. And pretty much every other track on this album, it's a very long album, but there's very little filler. Every track has a place and it works. I love the deep cut Step Into the Realm. I love the excellently curated beats and the soundscapes, a lot of which was done by live instrumentation. The guest appearances are fantastic. Mos Def on Double Trouble, DJ Jazzy Jeff on The Next Movement, Common on Act 2, Beanie Sigel with a legendary guest verse on Adrenaline. Things Fall Apart has great energy. It's conscious, it's introspective, at the same time it's gritty. It's arguably the centerpiece of what is an incredible, undeniable discography. That's why it should probably be in the top 50 instead of just knocking on the door of it, but yeah, I'm nitpicking by a few spots here, I guess. Halfway through the episode already, and we are now into the top 50. So pretty much every album from here on out should be universally considered a classic. The first one I like, it's a good pick. It's EPMD's 1988 debut, Strictly Business. I think this is great placement for this album. This would be right on the verge of my top 50 as well. Eric Sermon and Parrish Making Dollars, aka PMD, came together here on their debut, and they further put Long Island on the map during the golden age. It was that era that showed a lot of acts coming out of Long Island: Public Enemy, De La Soul, Biz Markie. Anyway, this is a great debut. The two MCs play off of each other very well, and they do so over funky beats that were made in-house. There's some great samples, some booming drums on this thing. These were among the hardest, most aggressive beats of 1988, and there was a lot of aggressive shit going around at that time. It's a great pick at number 50. This is one of two placements that Rolling Stone has absolutely nailed in this section of the list so far. Number 49 is another good one. I don't know if they exactly nailed it, but it's fairly appropriate placement from hip-hop's golden age. It's N.W.A.'s second album, Straight Outta Compton. This was one of, if not the most influential West Coast albums of the 1980s. It shows a group of future all-stars, kind of a supergroup before they could be considered a supergroup, coming together, consisting of Ice Cube, Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, MC Ren, DJ Yella, and they came with this furious, politically, socially driven lyrical theme about life on the streets of Compton, with a central theme being that tense relationship that the African American community had with local police departments, being in Compton or the LAPD. As I mentioned earlier, Ice Cube was kind of the heart and soul of the group. He led the lyrical charge on this album quite well. Dr. Dre already showed at this point in his young career that he was a force to be reckoned with behind the boards. The beats on this album are excellent. They're booming. They actually sound a little bit more East Coast driven. There's a lot of 808 stuff going on here. One criticism I have about this album is it comes out super strong. The A side is almost all classics, and then the B side kicks off with the seminal Express Yourself, and then it kind of just falls off. The last like 4 tracks on this thing are kind of forgettable. Still, a seminal album, very important, one of the most important albums, not just in West Coast hip hop, but in all of hip hop history. And I'd probably agree with the placement right inside the top 50. This is a really good pick. Donuts by J Dilla. All of a sudden, that's now 3 straight picks in the second half of this list as we enter the top 50 that are bangers. This is one of the best instrumental albums of all time. It's probably number 2 for me behind DJ Shadow's Introducing. It was released just 3 days before J Dilla's untimely death in 2006. Rumor has it that much of it was made from his hospital bed as he was suffering from lupus at the end of his life. It's one of the most remarkable instrumental hip-hop albums of all time. There's a lot of people, though, who put this album way, way higher, top 25, top 20. You see this album get glazed. Get it? Donuts? Glazed? Yeah? I'm not mad at it at 48. This is a busy, dense album that has some great melodic grooves and some just really good energy and soundscapes, and it's really impressive given the circumstances which this album was rumored to be created in, that Dilla was able to pull this off. The sampling is remarkable. It's broken up into more than 30 tracks. You get little bite-sized, almost like mini donuts, if you will, and there really is no other album like this in existence. A lot of producers, a lot of instrumental hip-hop albums kind of follow this format in the years to come, but I think quality-wise, Dilla does it better than just about anybody, and I think 48 is a nearly perfect placement for Donuts. Super Duper Fly by Missy Elliott at number 47. This is the best album by one of the turn of the century's great creative and performative forces in mainstream-facing hip-hop. She was aided by fellow Virginia Beach area native Timbaland from an unlikely kind of local cradle of hip-hop. That Southeast Virginia scene really was popping off during that time, and it kind of started with Missy and Timbaland coming out here in 97. This album was Missy's introduction to the world. It really grabbed people's attention off of the strength of the lead single, The Rain, Super Duper Fly. However, as good as this album is as a whole, and as much as I agree that it is a near classic, it is a little bit bloated. It's a little long. It's like over an hour. And while I'd most likely put this in my top 100, I don't think I can justify having it kind of this far up on the list. It was revolutionary. Again, it was one of those albums that put that Virginia Beach local scene on the map. That same scene would produce stalwarts like Clips and the Neptunes in years to come. And it showed Missy's young, unassuming, hungry delivery, and it kind of showed really that she had a lot of raw talent. She was kind of the next female voice to step up as hip-hop was finding a new identity after things really went commercial in the second half of the 90s. And she deserves a lot of credit for her original style and her delivery and her flair. But the album itself, just as a whole, if we're talking the whole thing, is not really quite of the quality that I'd consider classic. And subsequently, it doesn't get into my top 50, so I can't really agree with this placement. I think it's a little bit too ambitious, but I'm also not super mad at it. Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, the Creator, number 46. It's a little strange to see such a recent album this high on the list. And keep in mind, this album was just like a year old when this list came out, which is kind of wild. That said, I do think it's Tyler, the Creator's best hip-hop facing album. I do think I like this one better than Flower Boy, which is a really good album. I don't think it's his best album. I think that's Igor. That's not a hip-hop album for the most part. But Call Me If You Get Lost, his best hip-hop facing project as he returns to his roots. He has this confident, unwavering swagger on the mic and does so over these mostly self-produced and sampled beats. The beats are deep, they're lush, they're complex, there's a lot of musical importance to these, but there's also a lot of bragging, talking moments. He does also get rather introspective here, especially about love and lost love on cuts like Sweet, I Thought You Wanted to Dance, and Wilshire. And then he readily addresses these themes of love and romance, and then maybe a bar or two later he'll tell you about how many mansions and cars that he has, and there's kind of a cool juxtaposition in there. Call Me If You Get Lost, an amazing album. I'd argue for more of probably a top 75 placement, as just due to the fact that this is a newer album. It's an intriguing pick at 46, and I think it'll continue to age well as it has already in the first few years of its existence. 45 is probably what I consider the strongest album from one of the more important golden age players. That's 1990's Mama Said Knock You Out by LL Cool J. After kind of wavering a bit on his third album after a furious first two albums, Cool J comes back in 1990 with a confident, no-nonsense album that shows more of his furious rhymes and charisma over these hard, booming beats. Now look, I'm an East Coast hip-hop fan. I'm a New York resident. I really have a lot of appreciation for hardcore hip-hop, especially that of the 90s, and LL Cool J has always been one of those guys that's been in that conversation, but more so in the 80s. I've always thought he was overrated. Like, his work after this album, I just can't get into it. I don't really think he ever properly evolved as an artist as hip-hop did. I thought he was always kind of a step behind, and the last time he was somewhat in sync with the changing landscape of hip-hop was on this album. It is a good album. The title track, it's iconic. There's a lot of filler on this album at the same time, and you see that softer and sensitive side that really started to define his career and helped him have a mainstream breakout, just low quality records throughout the rest of the 90s. You see that on songs like Around the Way Girl. I just think that's a cheesy cut. I do think that overall, when you look at LL Cool J's discography, it's his most solid project from front to back, but he's always seemed a little bit gimmicky to me. I think some of the attitudes that he had around this time in his pissing contest with Cool Mo D, I think they're kind of antiquated. I just don't even consider any of his albums top 100 material, so I don't think this is a good pick. Here's an album that's in my top 20 that gets perennially pushed out to the top 40 or top 50 by these publications. It's Liquid Swords by GZA. This is the most lyrically intricate Wu-Tang project in existence. This is one of the best of that first wave of Wu-Tang solo albums, which is just a legendary collection of records. This shows GZA wrapping circles around nearly anyone in the game at that time, and there was a lot of dope rappers in 95. He does this with a myriad of double entendres, deep wordplay, references to chess and kung fu films, and all this esoteric shit. all over some of the coldest, darkest, and most special beats Wu-Tang Clan leader and producer RZA has ever blessed us with. GZA absolutely blows my mind on this album every single time. He tells these deep street stories on cuts like Cold World, Fourth Chamber, Investigative Reports, and how about the beat on that chilling closer, I Got Your Back? My god, ugh! But then he flips it around on tracks like Labels, where he uses that capability, that deep wordplay, to diss just about every record label in the industry at the time. Add to that the unbelievable guest appearances from other Wu-Tang Clan members like Ghostface Killah and especially Inspector Deck, who really shines in his guest spots on this album. And you have easily, for me, a no-doubter top 25 all-time hip-hop album. Now, you know I have a bias for that mid-90s East Coast stuff, specifically from New York. We've been over this ad nauseum on this channel. But you get rid of that bias, and if you know your hip-hop, you never dream of putting this thing anywhere outside the top 50 on a best of all-time list. Run-DMC's self-titled debut, 1984, at number 43 is an example of an influence-driven pick, I'm afraid. We've seen a lot of these in the wrong direction throughout this list, specifically in newer albums that have spawned new scenes and subgenres. It's more for the better in this case, as Run-DMC, they broke out, they shifted hip-hop forward from its initial infancy, when it was more of kind of like a street art, and it put it into the hands of the masses for the first time. This would actually be magnified on their later records, but it started right here with their self-titled debut. They changed both the art of rhyming and hip-hop production with this more aggressive, in-your-face style where the MCs are kind of yelling at you, even if there is kind of that nursery rhyme aspect to the rhymes. But they were aggressive, and they really brought that gritty 1980s New York feel. New York was a dangerous, crazy place in the 80s, and they sort of start to personify that a lot more on this record than most other artists from the era had done, save maybe Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5. There's so many iconic mid-school hip-hop songs on here, almost too many to name. I'll say that Rockbox has forever been one of my favorite songs off this album and in their catalog. They do touch on conscious issues on songs like Hard Times, and there's some great turntablism from Jam Master Jay on the Crush Groove tracks. Simply put, this album offered a whole new set of soundscapes and moods that hip-hop had never seen before. When I said this is an influence-driven pick, this is what I meant. It hasn't really aged so well musically. It's really not up to par with most of the albums on this section of the list, and it does sound a bit primitive because it is. It's more than 40 years old at the time of recording. Because of what it led to in later years, that's why it gets the nod here in the top 50, I'm sure. And while I'd put it probably much higher, like more towards the number 100 mark, I'm okay with this pick. I do think it makes sense, even if it doesn't perfectly match with personal tastes. Big Daddy Kane was one of the big names that broke out in the late 80s, undoubtedly inspired by Run-DMC in their early work. And he took rhyming to the next level in the second half of the 80s, along with contemporaries like LL Cool J, Cool G Rap, Chuck D, and of course Rakim. Kane's first album-level output was 1988's Long Live the Kane, which Rolling Stone slots in here at number 42. I like the golden age hip-hop love here once again lately. It's well-deserved on this list. Kane just blasts his way here through his debut album with these head-spinning bars, these crazy rhyme schemes and cadences. You have songs like The Furious, Set It Off, the unbelievable grit shown both lyrically and beat-wise from Marley Marl on songs like Raw, and of course the seminal golden age anthem Ain't No Half-Steppin'. Marley Marl, in fact, really laces this whole album with an excellent production job that reminds me just how special he was to golden age hip-hop and how vast his sonic contributions were. 88 was a really crowded year for quality hip-hop, and this album often flies a little bit under the radar when compared to some of the rest of the output from that year, but honestly, it shouldn't. This is a formidable debut. This is a bona fide classic album. We finished this section of the list out with a dud after a few solid picks in a row. It's Kanye West's Late Registration. I told you back during the College Dropout entry at number 52 that I don't like Kanye. I really lost interest in him after that first album. That said, the College Dropout, it's still a pretty decent album. I don't like his braggadocio and his stupid attitude on this thing, but it's a great album musically. I'll give him that. But you know that pick doesn't make sense to me. If I'm not going to put the College Dropout in even my top 100, where do you think Late Registration lands for me? Gold Digger is one of the album's most iconic songs. Frankly, that song is annoying. It's always irked me. This is kind of where Kanye started to really accelerate the development of this cringy, awkward, falsely confident, egotistical personality. I just can't with this album. To put it at number 41, Rolling Stone, I think, is pandering to his fans. I think it's a dumb pick. And I think most of these fans, most of these blind followers of Kanye that are still with him to this day, they wouldn't really know good hip-hop if it smacked them right in the face. That's it. Episode 8 down. How are we feeling about number 60 through 41? Comment below. Let me know what you think of my reactions. Do you agree? How do you feel? Thanks as always for coming along for the ride. Like and subscribe if you want more content. And also check me out on TikTok and Instagram, where I'm always dropping a lot of bite-sized content, a lot of shorter videos. I support all genres genres of music, even though we're focusing on hip hop here. I love having you guys along for the ride. Thanks for your support. I'll see you soon.